Hi, I'm Celia Almeida, and I'm here with Camila Cabello for the 45. Camila, thank you for speaking with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So we're talking a little bit about your new record and kind of like some of the different sound, the different aesthetics that you're showcasing on this record. You've discussed a little bit about the comfort that you felt with the producers that you worked with on this record. I know you worked with El Guincho. Like, how did you guys link up? His trajectory musically is so fascinating to me. So, how did you guys link
Mm.
up?
Well, his trajectory was fascinating to me also. And I loved Rosalia's albums. I loved El Mal Querer. I loved Motomami. And I was just like, wow, this is like some of my favorite pop music I've ever heard. It was like so forward thinking and so fresh. And so it was like in the beginning where I was just kind of trying people out. Um, and I had worked with like a few different producers in different realms. Maybe like some in the kind of American world, and then some more like in the kind of Afrobeat space, and some more like people that were living in Miami. But I definitely wanted to work with him because I knew he would kind of have like a fresh take on pop music based on his like previous work. And so I texted him the first time. I actually canceled the session because I forgot. I think I was just like, I had just come in from traveling from somewhere and I was too tired.
Mm.
And I was like afraid that he was annoyed, but he wasn't. And then, um, and then the next time we hung out, we were talking about just like, I was listening to a lot of like Afro beats. I've always listened to a lot of Afro beats, but he is from the Canary Islands. He also kind of like loved that music. We had a lot of the same like tastes in music, and immediately we were just like trying things that were different and new for me. And that always feels the most exciting to me when I'm working with someone who doesn't want to like, do Havana Part 3,
Yes.
but who wants to see me take me to, I don't know, like go to places that are uncharted territory for me, and who finds that challenge to be the most interesting and the most satisfying, as opposed to just like, let's make like an, like a whatever, like a big catchy pop song, like more taking it to a place of like what would be new and interesting and challenging and exciting. So I think he and Jasper both kind of have the same, are motivated by the same things.
Yeah, which it's really interesting because like obviously his work with Rosalia is legend, but she Motomami was like a really crazy turn too for her,
Yeah,
like compared to El Marquerer and obviously her very straightforward flamenco stuff. So it seems like he's kind of not afraid to um be a weirdo, and
yeah, totally.
yeah, and so you said you were kind of toying around with other producers. Like what sealed the deal for you about it being him? And like did you have the kind of sound that you wanted in mind already, or was it something that developed out of you guys being in the studio?
I think it definitely developed out of all of us being in the studio. We tried a lot of different corners of the sonic landscape. There was some that was kind of like more like, El Niño probably would like get on some live drums, and there was somebody like playing bass, and and then we were trying, like a Brazilian funk vibe. Like we really explored
Mm.
until we found the kind of musical landscape and language of the album. But I think what it was about Pablo was, I think he just like has such great taste, and he's such a kind of ruthless, um I don't want to say editor because I feel like that's not like a big enough word to encapsulate what he does, but like, things that other people think is like, oh, that's good. That's like a great catchy song. He's like, yeah, but is it different? Is it pushing things forward? Is it something we've already heard before? Or that line, I feel like that could be better. Like you could do better. You could give more color to that line. He's just very like ruthless in terms of his taste. And I think that that made me a better songwriter and made me a better artist. And at the same time, he's very like, I don't think he cares about what's going to make like, you know, the kind of biggest song on the radio at that time, if it's following trends. He really believed in me kind of taking on the bulk of the kind of like songwriting duties and being like, you know, you can do this on your own. Because my favorite stuff is when it's really like coming from you. And I think that like belief, like I think it's really how much he challenged me is what I think made him the person for me. Because a lot of other people, you work with a lot of people who are like, yeah, that's great. That's great. This is awesome. This is awesome. And I think he and Jasper are very critical, which I think makes the work so much better. Because yeah.
Have you been pushed in that way before by other producers, or was that kind of new for you?
No, some people, yeah. And those are usually my favorite people to work with. Like I remember with Frank, it was like that. With Frank, it was like that too. With Ricky, it was like that. Really, every main producer that I've worked with on a project has had that in common, where, you know, I don't like working with people who just like, yes, everything. Even though obviously it feels great in the moment and you're like, yeah, I obviously want you to tell me like, that's great, that's great, that's great, I'm doing great. But it doesn't really produce the best work. It's much better when someone's like, yeah, but you've done this before. Or, yeah, but, you know, and I think like, yeah, and I start to like, I think it just sharpens your ears and your sense of editing yourself, which I think is like, I think that's like the most important thing is like being challenged, even though it's like everything in life is like so paradoxical. It's like the worst feeling, but it's also the best, you know, it's like not the most comfortable feeling, but it makes you grow.
How do you know when something has gone beyond you guys fucking around with like new sounds in the studio and gone into something that you want to share with the world? Like, what is that moment?
I think like, you know, there were different moments where I was like, especially early on, before we had kind of established the kind of sonic language of the album, there were songs where I was like, this is a really great song. And I would show it to my friends and they would really like it. But I think like, it's just like a feeling in your body when you know that, I don't know, things just start coming together and you're like, this is not just a great song by itself, but it fits into this larger world. And other things start coming alive too, like, you know, colors or clothes or live performances or little details that are like, oh, the music is really making other things kind of come alive. And I think like, I really think like, as an artist, like you always have to be studying people that have like done great work, because then you're like, I know this is good, but it's not like good enough. And it pushes you to kind of keep going until you're like, oh, I would, you know, this stands up to like where my taste is at this point. And your taste, I think, as you get older, gets better and better and more refined. And especially for me, like I feel like being, you know, coming to the States when I was like 7 and, you know, having Latin parents, I wasn't exposed to a lot of American music or a lot of like the great artists. Like I was watching like, you know, the Beatles documentaries or the Bee Gees or Nina Simone documentary. And that was music that I wasn't really exposed to before. Like we just really grew up listening to like Michael Jackson and like Latin artists, you know? So, yeah, I think expanding your references is like, has been really important for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like when I listen to Familia, like I remember just having grown up like kind of, I mean, I was born here, but you know, there's a familiarity with your
Of
story.
course. Yeah, absolutely.
And when I listened to Familia, I remember like I immediately thought of like Celia Cruz. I thought of
Yeah.
like and obviously Celia is on the which was exciting for me because that's my name.
Yes. Yeah.
And then also
That one was about you, actually.
oh okay, thank you. I have confirmation. Hear that, everyone? And but I thought about like, Gloria Estefan's like Abriendo Puertas album, like
Yeah.
that I grew up listening to. And what I thought was
Yes.
really interesting about this record is that I feel like it shows kind of like that Familia to me shows like kind of the influences of the music that you're coming up with when you're growing up with your family.
Yes.
And
Absolutely. Yes.
this shows like when you start going on this record shows kind of like when you start going out on joyrides with your teenage
Exactly.
friends, you know what I mean, in Miami. So like what were some of the influences, like you were just talking about, going back and kind of studying the artists that really inspired you, that push things. What were some of the reference points that you were looking to when you're putting together this record?
Well, I love that you said that because I think a lot of people are like, well, Familia to this, it's like so different. And it's like, actually, I feel like it was actually for me what felt like on the inside a very authentic evolution because you're right. Like, Familia was kind of me digging further, my heels further into like the soil that I feel like made me. And those songs that, I can bear, like, I have these sensory memories of my parents playing these songs in the living room, and I intentionally went back and tried to kind of pay like an homage to that part of my life. And then I think this album is, like you said, it's like kind of like it's such a common story for kids from Miami. It's like you have one foot in the door of like your parents' homeland and your family's culture, and then this really interesting combination of another foot in the room of America and like American culture. And Miami makes that a very unique subculture. Um, and so, yeah, I think like for me, it was one, studying and expanding my references in terms of like, I would go and listen to like classic albums that I had never heard of before, that I'd never heard before, like, Pink Floyd or the Beatles or, um, like kind of like classics. But then at the same time, like, for example, in Miami, when I was in elementary school, it was like that era of like 2000s hip hop and R&B and, like T-Pain and, songs that I knew the songs, but I didn't know the artists.
Mm-hmm.
Like going back and listening to their albums and looking at, the Netflix documentary of like a hip hop evolution and seeing where these songs that I have these like memories of listening to the songs, but not knowing kind of like where all of that came from historically and musically in America. So yeah, I think it was just kind of like expanding things that I liked, but wasn't knowledgeable about.
I'm glad you said that because like one of the biggest takeaways that I had from previewing the record was like how big of an influence hip hop is on this record.
Yeah,
Like I feel like I definitely caught that kind of like 2000s hip hop influence, but also
totally.
not to give too much away, but you have some contemporaries on there and contemporary
Yeah,
influence,
yeah, yeah.
right? So did that come more from you or from working with your producers, and it kind of working with your producers got you in that mindset, or where did that come from, that specifically the hip hop influence?
I think I think it was a combination of both. I mean, Jasper and Pablo are both such huge hip hop heads, and speaking of expanding my references, they really, if I was like, I love, you know, these kind of rappers that everybody knows about, like that we all know of, they would show me five underground references that I didn't know about. So for every song that maybe I showed them that maybe we've all heard because I grew up listening to like honestly, I wasn't one of those cool kids that had like the very underground taste. I really liked, honestly, top 40 and what was popular.
Mhm.
Um, and they would show me for everyone that I showed them, they would show me 10 underground contemporary, or they would be like, well, if you like this song, this is what this song was inspired by.
Mhm.
And so I think like really making, I think I really got in my like student bag in this album, and like really did the research on like, oh, I love this song, and this sample or this line is actually taken from this song that's like from 20 years ago. So I think it's a combination. I've always like loved rap, and I've always loved like, you know, some of the artists that are on this album, like I'm a huge fan of. But I think definitely Pablo and Jasper really expanded my my knowledge. And also I think it's like whoever you work with, it's gonna like affect the alchemy of whatever you do. So if you're working with like people that are huge hip hop heads, you're more likely to like tap into your love for that genre. And if I'm working with somebody who, you know, like does salsa music, I'll probably tap into like my love for salsa music. It really is like an alchemy, even though my name is on it. It really is like, you know, it's collaborative.
Yeah. And I mean, I think when I Love It came out, that Gucci Man sample, I was like, where did that come from? You know what I mean? Like it was unexpected, you know?
Yeah.
And so being that this album, you were kind of having so much fun in the studio, I'm sure you've seen like some people, I Love It, like they don't get it. And they
I don't
feel
love it.
they don't love it. It's like just a sidebar on that. I think we're in this time right now where I think when people don't get things, then like it's a timeline where in 2 years it's camp, and then after that it's like a reclaimed
Right.
classic.
A
So
reclaim what?
a reclaimed classic, you know. Um,
Right, right.
Kind of reminds me like just like the imagery of this record and kind of like the sonic turn of I Love It kind of reminds me. This might be a weird one, so bear with me, but it kind of reminds me of like when Miley Cyrus put out her Dead Pets record.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I thought that record was definitely very strange, but I thought there was a lot of great stuff on it. And I was reading about it recently that it's kind of been like
Yeah.
reclaimed and people realize now that it has like great stuff on it. So when you read, you know, like kind of like mixed reactions online, are you thinking about all that, or is it like a little bit scary? Is it a little bit thrilling? Like, what does that feel like when you read reactions like that?
It's a good question. I think in the moment, I react in the most kind of human, like visceral, immediate sense where I'm like, my feelings are a little hurt. But then, you know, especially in the past 2 weeks, I'm like, I've kind of gotten off the internet more and more, and I can look at things with perspective. And you know, I don't take it personally because I feel like I'm honestly one of those people that I feel like sometimes I get things after other people get them. Like as a fan, as a music fan, it's not like the coolest thing to say about myself, but it's true. I mean, some things I feel like I'm early, and other times, you know, there'll be a song or an artist that everybody loves, and I'm kind of like, I don't get it, I don't get it. And then, you know, maybe like 2 years later or whatever, or even songs, then afterwards, I'm like, oh, what the fuck was I talking about? This is fucking amazing. So even I'm guilty of that. So I don't really take it personally. And I feel like, yeah, it's hard when you immediately read something that's like not positive. You are like, dang, I wish everybody liked it. But at the end of the day, it's like, I feel like the people that enjoy it, it's for them. And if not, then like, that's okay, you know. But I think the reclaimed classics thing is so interesting because I feel like so many artists where I feel like their work wasn't appreciated in that moment, and then it was. I mean, this is, I don't know, I don't think this is a reclaimed classic. I'm not saying that by any means, but even Shameless, for example, like was popular like or 3 years after it was released. So I don't know. I think that's actually one of the amazing things about the times we're living in now, where I feel like TikTok is like literally the breeding ground for reclaimed classics. Like it's like songs from, the 90s or whatever, like suddenly are number one and they're everywhere. And that kind of like is really exciting as an artist, because I think before it was this scarcity mindset of like, if it doesn't work now,
Right.
it will be underappreciated and nobody will ever, like, I love this so much and nobody will ever see it. People can get my music like long after I'm gone, which is cool. I like that a lot, honestly. It's like less pressure for it to be like, they have to get it right now or they never will. It's like, no, they could get it in 10 years or in 50, whatever,
Yeah, like everything, I think TikTok has like pros and cons as far as the music industry is concerned, and I'm sure you know that better than I ever could. But
Yeah.
like definitely one of the pros is like exactly if somebody didn't, it used to be like if something didn't hit or register, like your label could drop
It was
you.
lost.
Like that's it.
Yeah, totally.
And now it's like, there's countless examples now of people who were like, all right, well then I'll do it. And then the label might have dropped them, but it hit for people later,
Totally.
and you know, I also think there's an element there of like, and I'm not sure if this is a question, you let me know what you think, but I think there's like, I always think about like Gaga, like if people had met her as like, the piano driven singer songwriter that she was in college, how would they have reacted when she started doing electro pop? They probably would have thought it was inauthentic, right?
Right.
Uh, maybe they might not have gotten it because they have this expectation of who they were before, or who she was before. And I think with you, like people famously met you as a teenager, and it's like,
Yeah.
you're in your 20s, you're getting
Totally.
exposed to all this music per your, what you were saying earlier, and your tastes change and your influences change. It's just that the whole world is watching it and everyone has like opinions about whether it's too fast or,
Right.
not
Right.
or whatever, So like, what does that feel like for you when you have all these
Yeah.
opinions about something that's like just personal growth?
Right. Well, I think it's important for me, like control what I can, which is, I think, first of all, it's a fair criticism of anybody to make about anybody, because it's hard to stay true to who you are at all times and be authentic at all times in this world, and especially in this industry, because there are different parts of you that are like, well, I want to cause a reaction, I want this, I want that, or whatever. But I think for me, I just like control on checking in with myself constantly, like, why are you doing this? And does this feel real to you? Does this feel true to you? Are you doing this to get some kind of result? Or are you doing this because it's fun for you? And I really try to focus on that and constantly have to work at, there's like this quote that I love from this like spiritual text, the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh yeah,
And
I have that here actually.
yeah, and where the quote that says like, you have the right to, basically like, you have the right to do the work, but not to the results of your work. And it says it in a more poetic way. Like, I think it's like, you have the right to do your work, and it's your duty to do your work, but you don't have the right to the fruits of your work. And it's so easy, like, and I bet every artist feels this way, and it's something you have to constantly work against when, there's the business side of you that's like, oh, I'm seeing the numbers, I'm seeing the this, and you want to compete in a certain way, like you want, more people to listen to your music, more people to be invested in whatever. But I constantly have to bring myself back to, I do the work, I make sure it feels real to me and fun for me. And, if people, for whatever reason, don't like it, don't believe it, whatever, then there's like really nothing I can do about that. Like, I think that I also like, I don't really show a lot of behind the scenes. Like, like I have like a behind the scenes like studio person,
Mhm.
because I feel like then that process becomes performative and not sacred, and it becomes like you're like, oh, this is gonna look so fucking sick when, when it comes out that I, made this hook melody or whatever, which, I'm sure not everybody thinks of it that way, but I'm like, I think that's probably also, to be fair, maybe why people are like, oh, where did this come from? Because I don't have like a behind the scenes camera with me in like the year of making the album where I'm showing how I got from point A to point G,
Yeah.
but but that's like the trade that I make for my sanity and ironically my authentic life, you know? Um, but I think it's a process. Like I feel like I never think of it as like just in this moment. It's like building this kind of CXOXO world for the next 2 years. And, it's gonna take a second.
I think that's actually really well put about how it's kind of the inverse of what people are thinking. It's actually that's how you keep your authenticity. Like that's really well put.
Totally. That's
Um,
always how I feel like in like the world. It's always like the opposite of what people think. It's like it's funny.
well, let's say no one got it. At least one person got it, which is Lana Del Rey.
Yeah, for real.
You got to perform on Coachella with her, and she like publicly is just talking about how much she loves that song and like just like pushing it as an artist. Like that's like the biggest cosign ever. Like what does that feel
It's the
like?
biggest cosign ever. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Like I just like, to me, she is like, I really feel like one of the greatest artists of all time. And I say that with my chest. Like, I
Mhm.
just feel like she is so, I just can't. And the fact that she was like, she was so generous and like posted about I love it. I mean, I think she just genuinely really liked the song. And, she was like, I literally made this loop of the car video that you posted because I couldn't stop listening to the song. I was like, girl, I could have just sent it to you. You don't have to make like your own homemade loop. Um, but it's just like it feels so crazy to really like have her embrace me as an artist and embrace the song and post it. Like I just think she's like, when I talk about like studying like the greats and how they do things, she's like one of those people for me. um yeah, and she's also just like so genuine and sweet and so, speaking of authentic, like so authentic.
What was that like for you after you wrapped the song on stage? Like she like came over and like sang you the song and like was
you
like
know
very genuinely showing you love. Like what did that
I
feel
know.
like?
I mean, my first thought is always like, what? Like, I don't, my imposter syndrome is like at fucking 300. I'm like, what? I feel like I'm like robbing something from a store. Like, I'm getting away with something. I'm like, what did I do to deserve all of this kindness? um, and, immediately when I got off stage, I was like, guys, did I look so awkward during that part? Because I was just like, suddenly it was like, there was like me performing. And then suddenly I was like just like star-eyed looking at her, like so awkward because I was just in shock. I was like, I can't believe she's singing this song to me right now. She also, I feel like, is one of those people that even if she wasn't an artist or a famous person, you would be kind of like taken aback if you like just met her at a coffee shop. She has such a like magical, like charming, like presence, like even like just her facial expressions. I don't know. There's just something really special about her.
I think we're like wrapping up on time, sadly, because I feel like I could talk to you about this stuff like a lot longer.
Me
Um,
too.
but I think I just have to say that I think it's pretty it's like exciting to watch like when an artist is like very committed to experimentation sonically and visually. I think it's going to be really cool for you to look back and see, that you did something that kind of made people stop and think a bit, you know what I mean?
Thank
Because
you.
did the unexpected, you know? And, you know, so having said that, like, what do you see for this kind of like era that's coming up? Like, do you want to tour it? Do you want to, yeah, or is that kind of in the works? Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I definitely want to tour this album because I feel like it's like this is the first time I'm like I feel like if I were a fan, I would just like want to be a part of this world, like the kind of like C XOXO world and like aesthetic. It's just like feels so fun. It feels so fun even for me to tap into more of that energy, you know? And it feels like very kind of in my own way, like I don't really like the word positive because it sounds so like clinical, but like it feels very like empowering to myself and to like what I, you know, hopefully other people to just like tap into this kind of like baddie energy. And I'm just like excited for that to kind of keep taking a life of its own.
Yeah.
Because I
And
feel like it's like my way of, I don't know, like being of service to the world, even though it sounds like, I don't know, like my favorite artists, especially my favorite female artists, make me feel strong and empowered. And it feels cool that I feel like I've taken inspiration from that. And hopefully I can do that for people with this album because that's definitely very much the goal.
two quick little things that I wanted to talk to you about that, which was like I know being like a Latina, there's all these like expectations of propriety that people put on us, you know, and like
Mhm.
you know, what is that like when you know, put out songs that are a little bit racier or that kind of thing? Like, is that something that's in the back of your head ever? Is your family very like understanding?
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, you know, funny enough, I think it does come back to authenticity. I think it's like checking in with yourself, checking in with your intentions. Am I doing this to, you know, because I want more attention, or am I doing this because it's an authentic, fun expression of my sensuality? And, you know, maybe 1 out of 10 times I'm human and it might be the first one, but 9 out of 10 times it's the second one. So I feel like that's like good enough, you know? But I think my family, I'm just like, for me, more than I always try to keep it in the broader context of my life as opposed to music and making sure that I'm the person that I want to be, you know, because that's what it's about. It's like the journey of life and becoming more and more who you are. So to me, this album and music is just a tool for that. But I think like I never want to like get it mixed up, you know, the other way around where who I am is just a tool for music or for success. Like I always want it to be like my work is in service to my whole life.
And the last thing I did want to ask you about, which was that the record is very much, I would say, like a love letter to Miami. And your last record was like a love letter to family. Um, I think, not to put stuff in your mouth, but
Oh yes, it's true. Yes.
but this one feels like such a love letter to Miami in so many ways that people will hear and see. Why do you think why did you want to do that right now? And I definitely think it aligns with baddie energy, I have to say.
I love that. That makes me so happy. Well, I've spent so much time. I never moved out of Miami, but the last few years I've really spent more and more time there and more time exploring the city, and like more and more of my family has like moved, you know, from Cuba, so we're kind of like all in the same place. And I really feel like, you know, it's almost like the first step is like my family and my roots, but Miami is like a place that, you know, took our families in. And I feel like it's very beautiful to personify a place like that, you know, and to be like, you know, that city has like welcomed kids like us and people like us like with open arms, and I think it makes it different from any other place in the United States. And you know, I love the articles that I've seen that's like, you know, there's like Miami English because of the, you know, like different ingredients of, you know, immigrant Spanish and immigrant English. And I just find that so interesting. And it feels nice to be able to claim that as a place that I belong to.